Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today, we're going to talk about my initial experience with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. As a disclaimer, I did receive a copy of this sim from Xbox, and my opinions are from my release day gameplay. I tried out Microsoft Flight Sim for a few hours, and in that time, I experienced a large number of problems and issues. Here's what they were. Number 1. The login queue. Although this is no longer an issue, on the release day, there was a huge bottleneck of players trying to download and install Microsoft Flight Sim. It took me about 5 hours to fully download and install the game, but I heard from others that it took even longer for them. The unfortunate thing about the login queue was that if you exited the game, or if your game crashed, you would have to re-enter the login queue upon starting up. My game did crash during my playthrough, and I had to wait over an hour to get back into the game. Number 2. Speaking of crashing, simple things like entering the control settings, specifically the hardware settings to fine-tune your peripherals, cause the game to crash every single time. This was particularly frustrating as I was unable to fine-tune the input curves for my eye tracker, which sent me back into the login queue. Number 3. Tobii Eye Tracker barely works with Microsoft Flight Sim 24. When you first boot up the game, the main menu moves around based off of your eye movement from the Tobii Eye Tracker, which is really cool at first. For the most part though, this is broken and the eye tracker will cause the Earth to spin at a nauseating rate, which is just very unpleasant to watch. Additionally, while flying, Microsoft Flight Sim would take input from my eye movement from left to right, but barely moved up or down. I did manage to go into the settings to reset Tobii, which gave me very limited head tracking, but the curves were so off that I had to turn my head 90 degrees to get any sort of camera movement in-game, making it essentially useless. If you're more tech-savvy than me, there are ways to use OpenTrack to recalibrate the curves, but currently Tobii is not compatible with Microsoft Flight Sim, and I personally won't be returning until there's an official fix. Number 4. The default assists are automatically turned on in Microsoft Flight Sim, which made flying helicopters incredibly unrealistic and frustrating. As someone who has flown multiple helicopters in DCS, I was incredibly confused when the Microsoft Flight Sim helicopter was given little to no power and I continued to just hover on the spot. For a flight simulator, this does not simulate how a helicopter would respond to low power and made it very difficult to control the altitude. After I turned off the assists, it did get a little easier to maneuver, but to put it into technical terms, it still felt like I was flying a wet noodle. Number 5. Binding flight controls were not straightforward and were either problematic or broken. I was running landing challenges, and every single time I redid the challenge, my bindings would magically disappear and I would need to set them up again. This will happen unless you go into the airplane controls and select Apply to All Aircraft when setting up your bindings. Personally, I feel like this should have been the default when setting bindings, as this is how it was in Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, but let me know in the comments if you feel otherwise. There were moments where the throttle seemed to disconnect as well and stopped receiving input from my peripherals, even after properly binding it. You can see in this clip that the engines are stuck at 100% for the entire challenge, and auto throttle was not turned on. Lastly, when flying the F-18, binding the air brakes was really annoying as they had only listed them as spoilers, not speed brakes and not air brakes. I bound it to an unused toggle on my stick to ensure it didn't conflict with other controls, but activating my air brakes somehow simultaneously turned my engines off as well. On the topic of the F-18, this leads me to number 6. The plane physics and tolerances did not feel good, especially when flying the F-18. I have a lot of experience flying and landing the FA-18C in DCS, which has given me a good understanding of how this jet works. Hornets are built to take the abuse of hard carrier landings and have fairly robust, sturdy landing gear. I generally wouldn't expect an F-18 to fly as well in Microsoft Flight Sim as it does in DCS, but it felt like the landing gear was particularly fragile. On this landing, as soon as I touched the runway, the left landing gear seemed to break and resulted in my crash. My jimmies were so wrestled that we ended up replaying the clip of the landing several times over just to figure out what went wrong. The F-18 felt incredibly fragile, and unless I landed as smoothly as I possibly could, the gear would break, which is highly uncharacteristic of the F-18. Although Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 does have improved graphics, new aircraft, and new gameplay features, it was pretty disappointing to see how often it would crash, how many bugs it had, and that there was minimal compatibility with the Tobii Eye Tracker. Out of all of the issues I had, not being able to use my eye tracker to pan the camera in the cockpit was what mainly ruined my experience on release day. I hope to return to the simulator once a lot of the issues are fixed, as I really do enjoy flight sims, and I think Microsoft Flight Sim 24 has a lot of potential. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you've had a chance to dive into the game, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know how your flights have been going. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, we'll catch you later.